The LA-2A compressor is a simple two-knob compressor, or is it? Used by engineers and producers for decades with a unique sound that is still highly sought after. It's not just any compressor. This one's got a hidden superpower that works amazingly with your bass. I'm Twisty, and in this video we're going to go into the LA Studio Comp Line 6 Helix's version of the LA-2A compressor. It's based on the classic LA-2A optical compressor, which is known for its warmth, its smooth response, and its ease of use. Remember, only two knobs apparently. If you're using a Helix, HX Stomp or HX1 and you want a tighter, more pro bass tone, perhaps this compressor is the one you need to add to your signal path. Let's have a look. Getting control of the dynamics of your bass playing is one of the primary reasons to add a compressor to your signal path. It enables you to tame the louder parts of your playing, the top parts that break out like your pops and slaps, and also allows you to bring up the softer ones, maybe some tapping or some harmonics, to make your bass fit better in the mix. In the video I've got above, here or here, I cover some of the core functions around a bass compressor when I looked at the threshold, gain, ratio, etc. with the Rochester comp. And I also covered how I use the Rochester comp at the beginning of the signal path to get the foundation of my bass tone. But what if you've done that and after adding a bunch of effects in the rest of your signal path, it still doesn't fit? Or maybe you don't want that aggressive bass compression at the front, but you want to maybe get a bit of a tubey sound and some make it sound a bit more cohesive in the mix. Playing bass often involves a wide dynamic range due to varying techniques that you may use. You may put some pops in, you may put some slaps in, you may put some soft hammer-ons, you may put some ghost notes. The use of a compressor helps to manage those variations in your playing and prevent the bass from sounding either too quiet in some spaces or too loud in others. This allows you to have your bass fit more seamlessly with the other instruments that you're playing along with, either in a live performance or in the studio trying to fit your bass into a more complex mix. You know how guitarists like to have 400 tracks, right? The Teletronix LA-2A is a legendary tube-based optical compressor which was introduced in the early 1960s. It was designed by Jim Lawrence of the Teletronix company, and it was later produced by Universal Audio as a leveling amplifier, meaning that it automatically smooths out the volume levels using compression. It quickly became a favorite of studio engineers for its smooth, natural musical compression that could transparently control the dynamics with minimal distortion. So it doesn't add distortion as you increase the compression. Being an analog compressor, it also provides that tube-like sound where if you're using a solid state type amplifier, maybe the Gallien-Kruger, and you want to get a little bit of tube sound to it, adding this compressor to the end of your chain can help give you that tube sound. With only two main knobs, a peak reduction and a gain knob, and a simple compression versus limiter switch, so compress or limit, it was incredibly easy to use and it sounded great on almost everything. In fact, for decades, the LA-2A has been considered the default compressor for vocals, bass, drums, and guitars. Let's have a look at the Line 6 Helix's LA Studio Comp version of this simple two knob compressor and see what other things have been added by the engineers. Check it out. Let's have a look at the controls on the LA Comp. So we've got the peak reduction here. So the peak reduction sets the amount of compression by lowering the threshold and making the compressor engage on the quieter signals. So unlike some of the other compressors in the Helix family that are available, on the LA Studio, the threshold and the ratio are linked under the same thing. By increasing the peak reduction, what you're doing is you're lowering the threshold for when the compressor will kick in, and it also has a fixed ratio of around about between 3 and 4 to 1 compression ratio. So as you dial in or increase the peak reduction to increase the reduction, you are lowering the threshold value and you are therefore enforcing that compressor. As a general guide for the bass, what you want to do is you want to turn that up until you get around a -3, 3 to 5 dB reduction in gain. So gain is the makeup gain. As I increase the compression, the volume will drop. So if I go and increase that compression, you hear I'm dropping down to about -18 on that scale. Now the type is compressor or limiter. In compressed mode, the ratio is at around about 3 or 4 to 1, between 3 to 4 to 1. Whereas on limit, it's around about the 10 to 1 ratio. So you're going to have more of a brick wall effect. We'll come back to the emphasis in a moment. The level is like all Line 6 blocks. It doesn't affect the tone. It just allows you to increase or decrease the volume of the block in your signal chain. So if you're playing around with that gain and you still can't get that volume parity, you can adjust that with the level there. And the mix allows for it allows for parallel compression, where you can dial in some of the dry signal to mix in with the compressed signal. Get more of that punch from your dry, but then the compression of the end. Now, one of the other controls that's missing here is the attack. So the attack is fixed, and it's fixed at around about 10 milliseconds. So a fairly quick attack. So now we've looked at the controls. Dialing in the compressor is super simple. As I've done here, I would place the compressor at the end of the signal chain. I've got an Ampeg SV4 Pro. I'm running that into a 410 cabinet. I'll just turn that compressor off for a second. So this is the sound I'm going to get out of that. Fairly nice and clean. So with the compressor, we want to start with the set to compress, and we want the emphasis set to 10. We'll come back to the emphasis in a minute, but let's leave that at 10. Set the peak reduction for around about 5 to 7. So at around 5, when you look at the dial on your Helix, you should start to see between 5 to 7 or 3 to 5 dB loss. Playing around with it on here, I'm around about 4.7 gives me that. So again, around about 5. And what you're looking for is a 3 to 5 dB gain reduction. And then I'm going to make that up with the gain. So if I put gain to 0, you'll hear nothing. But as I turn that gain up, and I want that to be the same as without the compressor on. It's a little bit louder, but that's okay. So that's it. I've done. Peak reduction to about 3 to 5 dB loss, and then make up the gain. If you want to put more squash into it, then increase the peak reduction. If you want less, reduce that. And again, then adjust the gain around that. Now the level, as we said before, if I can't dial that in very well, or I'm still not getting accurate, maybe I've got heaps of peak reduction in, and I can't do the makeup gain, then you can adjust the level to make that up. This just leaves us with the emphasis knob, which is the superpower we talked about before. Now, hidden next to the reduction knob on the original unit is the emphasis control. Now it's set to fully clockwise, is flat, which means that it is compressing all of the frequencies evenly. By turning it counterclockwise, or in our case from 10 back down to 0, I'm going to put more compression on the higher frequencies and less compression on the lower frequencies. So the string noise, the pop, and the pick attack is going to be more compressed than the underlying bass notes. So by doing this, we're enabling what's called sidechain compression. So let's say, like me, you've got new round wound strings and I'm finding that the compressor is overreacting to the clicking of the strings. Well, what I can do is I can start turning down the emphasis, which means it's going to start putting more compression on the higher notes. But it's not going to put as much compression on the lower notes. So the lower notes will come through a lot nicer or more with more attack, but the higher notes won't over-drown them out. Now, while it doesn't affect the EQ or the tone directly, the more you're squashing the high end, the more darker that tone's going to appear to be. So an intermediate setting, I like between 5 and 7. 7 means that you're almost letting all of the frequencies be compressed at the same time, but I'm just treating some of the higher notes a little bit more. So it should give you a nice high pass type of feature. So a bit of sustain, which is what I want, a bit of compression, and that's about it. Again, play around with the mix to see if you want to get some of that dry signal in to get even more of your brighter attack coming through. The LA Studio Comp is great tail end Charlie compressor that can tighten up your overall sound by placing it towards the end of your signal path. The emphasis control, usually hidden or underutilized on the physical device, but made available and easy to use as part of Line 6's Helix platform, gives you the ability to fine-tune the compression of your high frequencies while maintaining the dynamics of your low bass frequencies. This is fantastic for using with your bass. So understanding the emphasis control is a real game changer when you're trying to use that compressor with your bass and even with your guitars. If we add in the ability that Line 6 have given us to introduce parallel compression with the mix switch, with the mix control, then the LA Studio Comp is now my second favorite compressor in the Helix. You'll need to check that other video out to see which my favorite is. I often use it at the end of my guitar presets when I'm mixing a song. Jason Sadites, who I've referred to before, often has this as the final thing in his guitar presets to glue his entire guitar sound together. And I find with the guitar that works really, really well. And when I'm doing recording, I often use the LA-2A at the end to make sure that I can tie and put a bit more control around the bass. So I don't use it in my live rig because I use the Rochester, but in my recording sessions, I often put it in at the end, even if I've used the Rochester at the front. If you're using the model of a transistor or solid state amp like the Gallien-Kruger, then often putting the LA-2A at the end of your signal chain can give you some warmth or even some tape type analog sound on your tone. Not so important for live, but in the studio, if you're looking for a bit more of that analog type sound, that can help you with that in the studio. Once you've got your peak reduction set and then your gain set to make up the difference in volume loss, play around with reducing the emphasis and putting some dry bass in the mix to see what happens. And now that you've got your main tone sorted out with your compressors, check out this video to see if you need to deal in some IRs instead of some cabs. Chat to you later.